Hey, it's interesting to know that according to polls, if most people had to do it over again, they would marry the same person. Isn't that encouraging? I mean, yeah, that's me. I would say, yeah, if I had to do it over again, I would marry Jada all over again. You're not very confident in that, but you should. Oh, Scott, there you go. Greens go. Even though divorce rates are significant, most marriages stay intact. That's an encouraging bit of information as well. Now, Michael Hyatt says that marriage involves opposites, and that means either friction or some beautiful harmonies, right? I can say that we've had friction and we've had beautiful harmonies. And anything you want to just talk about that? And typically, when we co-teach together, whether it's on relationships or other things, we typically have a knockdown, drag-out fight the week before.
I planned my week away last week.
So yeah.
good reason.
Anyways, whether it was that or some other reason, it felt like a Christmas miracle to me. So
Yeah, like I told first service, if something's going to happen in our house, it happens on Saturday. Our kids could sleep perfectly all week, and something happens on Saturday night. So if you think about it, pray for your pastors on Saturday. Appreciate it.
that's right. Well, we haven't had any major conflict, but the day is still young, so there's hope, right? Yeah. Okay, so what are some of the things? Like, we've had some friction. What are some things that we've had friction over?
Sleep.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. When you have gotten used to living on your own and then you're married, and then you have this person in your bed. And we were out with some friends on Friday night, and the wife and I, we were commiserating about how our husbands sleep so soundly, and we would love to be able to sleep.
I think soundly is code for snoring. Is that
Yes,
what you're trying?
sno-
Yeah.
yes,
You're being a
deep,
little nice.
Deep, very deep. And then Saturday, I wake up and on Facebook, there's one of those little pictures that says, I don't want to sleep like a baby. I just want to sleep like my husband. And I'm like, I identify with that. Yes, so sleep has been a
I'm
thing.
just going to say that's a first world problem. I mean, seriously. Okay, one of the things we've also had conflict over is cover stealing, right? Like, Jada will accuse me of stealing the covers. What I don't understand is that sometimes the covers end up way on her side, hanging off her side of the bed, and yet it's somehow I've pushed them over. Does that make sense to anybody? What the heck? All right. Thanks, Adina. You're awesome. Okay, anyways, also we have different personalities, and that contributes to some friction. So I'm an ENTP, which is like, if you know Star Wars, I'm R2D2. I'm the originator, creative, mischievous, maybe would be a good term. And Jada's an ESTJ. You want to say what Star Wars character you are?
So he wants you all to know that I'm Darth Vader.
Yeah.
We didn't say that first service either.
Yeah. This is my ENTP coming out, right? Yeah.
Just fly by the seat of the pantsness.
Yep. So anyway, so we've had some conflicts because you're an ESTJ, which...
I'm an ESTJ, which I just found out like 2 years ago. It's one of the least common personality types for women. And so I'm in this 2-year cohort, and I was like one of 4 women in this class, sitting on the front row, not knowing how many people had raised their hands behind me. And I go up to my professor after class, and I'm like, all my life I have felt like a square peg in a round hole, and this is like brilliant information for me. And he starts laughing. He goes, well, of course you have. Because I think more like a man than a woman.
Yeah, but you're not. I mean, you're not a man. You're clearly a woman, right?
Clearly.
Yeah, right. Good. We're good there.
Stereotypically, we
right,
should
yeah.
say.
So you are a thinker, a planner. I like to fly by the seat of my pants and have fun. Yeah, so you could just read into that whatever you want to. Okay, hey, friends, let's start this conversation off by listening to these words from Hebrews chapter 13. These concluding comments from the author. Friends, keep loving one another like your brothers and sisters. Right? Remember to show hospitality to strangers, for in doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels and not even known it. Continue to remember those who are in prison as if you yourselves were together with them in prison, and those who are being mistreated as if you yourselves are suffering. Now, marriage should be honored by everyone, and the marriage bed should be kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. And remember to keep your lives free from the love of money. What I mean by that is learn to be content with what you have. For God says, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. And so in response to God, we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. So Paul here is concluding this conversation. And he's just kind of bullet pointing some practical ways to live out the faith, some practical reminders to the people there. And so it seems like maybe it's like a hodgepodge list, but to me, it all feels like it fits very, very, very well together. According to theologian George Guthrie, the institute of marriage in the first century was being assaulted from two sides. The first was this, is that some felt that chastity in marriage was unreasonable. Whether you're a believer or not, there was this particular thought that chastity was not reasonable. The other felt like marriage stunted spiritual devotion, which kind of is a throwback to our conversation last week from 1 Corinthians chapter 7, that you know, when Paul was really talking about you, when you're single, you have this opportunity to be devoted to the Lord in a way that you don't when you're married. Your attention is divided there. Well, this passage in Hebrews 13 is really trying to address the first issue, that in the Roman world, men were expected to take mistresses, right, and or other sexual partners. It was a normative part of their culture. And so he's saying, hey, wait, that should not be the case as a believer. So today, so adultery and sexual immorality were widely embraced in this context, in this period of time in history. For me, it sounds kind of familiar to the environment we're living in today, that there's this ongoing acceptance of multiple partners in adultery, right? So today, Pastor Jade and I are going to talk about how we have attempted to not just survive in marriage, but to have our relationship thrive. And I want to just be honest with you from the very beginning, is that we have not done it perfectly. We are not perfect people. We do not have the perfect marriage, right? Right, yeah. Okay, so first idea about marriage here from Hebrews 13 is that marriage should be honored by all. So whether you're single or married, you should look at marriage and honor it, right? So if you're single or married, you should not do something that devalues another marriage. You should not do something, if you are married, that devalues your marriage. So thriving marriages honor each other. And honor here means to respect. To respect to such an extent that you view it as precious. So honor means to view your marriage, or to view marriage of another couple, as something that is precious to them. And this morning we want to share with you a couple ways that we've attempted to honor and value our marriage. And again, we have not done this perfectly, right? You probably hear us say that half a dozen more times in this talk. The first way we've attempted to do it, and we've developed it over the last 16 years of marriage, is that we've learned how to intentionally connect. So connecting together in relationship is something we've made a priority, especially in the last few years when technology has exploded, and that we have this whole trend where we like to tell the world what's going on in our lives, but we live like absence from the people that are around us, right? So we intentionally connect. I thought this was fascinating, this statistic. 95% of personal conversations today, based on this one study, occurs through some type of technology. 95% of personal conversation. We have removed human emotion from our relationships, and we replaced it with colorful bubbles. I don't know, I'm so guilty of sending an email and having people think I'm angry at them, right? Because you can't read the emotion of an email. And so we're devoid of emotion in terms of communicating through texting or Twitter or Instagram or whatever we do, right? So one of the things that we have tried to do is connect intentionally around a table for a meal. You've probably heard us say that a few times. And we try to make it a rule that we break occasionally, right? Not on purpose.
Because our kids let us know.
Yeah, our kids do tell us, right? They that we don't have technology at the table. So when we're having dinner, we want to be present with each other. So we put the iPhones or the iPads off to the side. That's one of the ways we've been intentional about connecting. The other way that I've tried to be intentional is to say, in my mind and in my practice, that my family is first and my work is second. And it doesn't mean that I don't do my job. It doesn't mean that I don't work 50 hours a week. But it means that I'm available. And I learned this from my dad, who was a senior engineer for Boeing, and I had complete access to my dad. Anytime I wanted to call my dad, which I did often throughout the week when I get home from school or whatever, I'd call him, and I had his phone number at his desk, and he would answer the phone. And he would have a conversation with me. And there was no hurry to get off. There was no I've got work to do. It was, I'm here for you, and we had our conversation. And there's times when, in the middle of my dad's work week, like most dads, I think, many of us here today would say, my child is stranded in trouble, I'm leaving work to go get them, right? So I had those kinds of experiences. So that's kind of how I think of putting family first and putting work second, in the sense of being available and having access to them.
And we've, in intentional connection, we've also tried to do our best at prioritizing time together as a couple. We love our children. We are devoted to our children, but we know that we have to invest in our marriage as well. And regardless of if you don't have children at this point, or if you have an empty nest at this point in your marriage relationship, it's just very important to intentionally make time to invest in your marriage relationship. That looks really different for the different seasons and stages of marriage and family life. We've never lived near grandparents, and so to be completely honest, we've kind of coveted our friends who have grandparents in the area, because we're like, that must be nice. But what we have done, we have made sure each month we budget at least one date night a month, which includes babysitting. We also had some college students live with us for a time who graciously gifted childcare to us. We believed in early bedtimes for our kids. Our kids were in bed between 6:30 and 7 most nights. That worked for our family. Wouldn't work for my friends whose kids go to bed at 10 o'clock, or their family rhythm was later. But for us, we put our kids to bed early, and then we had a late dinner or movie night at home. But we always just have tried to be intentional about investing in our relationship. Now, it's not always a date. Right now that our kids are older and we both are working, and I predominantly have a lot of evenings where I'm working, we try to have 30 to 45 minutes in the mornings together to just kind of look over our day, to connect, and to see kind of where we're going that day or that week. But it's very important. And it's not to the detriment of nurturing our children, but we truly believe it's to the betterment of both our responsibilities as parents, but also our responsibilities to one another as husband and wife.
Yeah, awesome. And the early bedtime thing was something that was when our kids were younger.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't go to bed that early.
And we experimented with do we keep them up later? And I don't know if it was a curse or what, but they were up at 6:30 no matter what time we put them to bed. So we thought, let's put them in bed.
Just went with it.
Put them in bed at 6:30 at night, and they sleep to 6:30 anyways. Then it's like a little bit of freedom. Yeah, a little bit of good. Well, the second thing we do to honor and value our marriage is to serve one another. And we are intentional about how we do this. We believe that marriage works best when each person serves the other person. Now, Paul says to husbands and wives, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. The word submit there literally means to subjugate, right? So it's both parts subjugating themselves to the other person. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to view myself as less than you, right? Because in Jesus' kingdom, the first will be last and the last will be first. You want to be the greatest and be the greatest servant of all. And so Paul is continuing that thought on, serve one another out of reverence for Christ. So we really land on that particular verse, and we try to serve one another. That works good in terms of how we're wired and gifted in our relationship. I think trying to outserve another person is probably the best way for every marriage, right? But I'm a little biased in that. There is something dysfunctional. This isn't just my statement. I actually read this from a study a few weeks ago. There's something dysfunctional about may be dysfunctional about you or your relationship, if you look at something that needs to be done in your house and you walk over it and say, that's not my job, right? That's not my role, not my chore or my responsibility. Danelle Davis says this, and she wrote this blog called 20 Things to Remember When Your Wife is Overwhelmed. And she says this: the sexiest thing you can do is help her. Do the dishes without her asking. Scrub the toilets. When you show her you are there to help her, she will love you, if you know what I mean. And I'm not really sure. What is she talking about there?
I think there's truth to that. John does 95% of the laundry in our home. That is very sexy to me. It takes a whole load off of me.
No pun intended.
No pun intended, yeah. What I am learning too, just in the last year, is you've heard of Gary Chapman's book, The Love Language book. I just learned within the last year that acts of service is one of my love languages. And I'm a very task-oriented person, so I didn't fully appreciate everything he does around the house. But I tell you, when he does things, it just really fills my love tank. So if you haven't read that book, I would very much encourage you to read it and to find out how you give and receive love, because it really does make a difference.
Yeah. So another benefit of fully engaging in responsibilities at home or with kids or even in each other's work lives, because we both work, and so we viewed marriage as a team. We've come at it from that approach. Another benefit to that is a greater degree of empathy, that you're able to understand what the other person is going through, what it takes. For example, last week when Jada was gone for a week and I was, full-time working, homeschooling the kids 24/7, I learned that kids really do make you lose your mind. Right?
And I think our kids would say that parents make them lose their mind too.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're guilty of exacerbating them as well, yeah. So anyways, so I learned to empathize with what Jada goes through as the primary homeschooler and with her other work commitments in various venues as well. So that Jada isn't just overreacting when I come home, that she literally needs, a break from the kids. So any other thoughts you want to add there? Or?
Well, I think in serving one another, like you mentioned, one thing that we do try to do, and we don't always get it right, is to outserve one another. If we see something, John knew that I was getting ready to go for a trip, so he got off the suitcase and things for me to where I could pack, and that really was helpful. But from day one, we have just always viewed our marriage as teamwork, be it, parenting, providing, nurturing, homeschooling. We just see it as a team. We don't see chores and responsibilities as around our home as woman's work or man's work. We just view it as, if it needs to be done, who has the skill set, the strengths, or the availability to get it done, and we just roll up our sleeves and do it. And then now that our kids are older, we have trained them to help within the family functioning of our home.
Yeah.
So if that stuff gets done, we can have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. The third thing we try to do to value our marriage is to be intentional about how we communicate and what we communicate to each other. Friends, the attraction part of a relationship is easy, right? That comes natural. But to really develop true emotional, spiritual, and eventually physical intimacy, it takes a lot of work in marriage, and it's a long-term project, right? I always say this, you've probably heard me say this a couple times, whenever I'm counseling people, and I say marriage is hard work, I found out that the first 15 are the hardest. And they'll ask me, how long have you been married? I'll say 15 years, right? Because marriage is not easy. It's not easy work. So, 4 things that Jada communicates to me. She's intentional in her communication that builds me up and honors me, right? These are 4 things she does. She believes in me. She speaks belief. So she calls out the gifting that God has in my life. She calls out who I am, and she says, I believe in you. There's belief. There's appreciation. She's thankful for the things that I do. She speaks words of affirmation as well on top of that. One of the things that Jada affirms in me sometimes, which I need, is that at times I'm a complete moron. Right? And thank you. Nobody else, is that too close to home for some of you? Yeah, you're all laughing, thank you. That's true, right? But one of the things that Jada speaks and brings intentionally is a different viewpoint. She makes me smarter. She makes me, because of her uniqueness and her giftedness and how she brings that fully into the relationship, she makes me more intelligent, a better person. One of the greatest gifts Jada has ever given to me is that she doesn't expect me to read her mind. She doesn't expect me to read her mind, right? Now, I know that there's a desire that she would desire for me to be emotionally intelligent enough to know what's going on underneath the surface. But the reality is that I just don't. And so, thank you for that gift.
Well, you know, and some of you may know, some of you may not know, the way John and I met is he hired me. So we had several years of working together in a work relationship before, you know, the romance started. And I think that really kind of gave us some good tools in our toolbox after we started dating and then got married. We just knew how each other kind of were wired and ticked in many regards.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think another thing that has contributed to the health of our relationship, and as it relates to intentional communication, is that John doesn't put me in a box. He doesn't expect me to be in a box. And what I mean by that is early in our marriage, I began reading a lot of really good Christian books written for women. And now there's this overarching theme of what a Christian woman is. And then there are two different camps, you know. We all have different biblical interpretations of what the Proverbs 31 woman was. Well, I was reading some particular books that fell into one side of the camp, and I stressed myself out, like to the point of anxiety, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not who I am. But I was trying to be this perfect wife and everything, and finally he looked at me one day. He's like, what are you doing? This is not the woman I married. Would you stop? And I was like, but this book says I'm supposed to be this way. And he's like, that's not who I married. You are still a godly woman, even though you don't fit into this box. So we had a nice little book burning. We did. So, you know, nothing against good Christian literature, but the fact of the matter is you have a direct line to God. Let God be who tells you how you're supposed to live your life, or you might drive yourself crazy like I did.
Yeah, I mean, there's some clear biblical directives, right? That, you know, this is sin, this isn't sin. But there's some gray areas, and that's where we rely on the Holy Spirit's leading and the influence of other godly people around us, yeah.
And you've also really, he's also encouraged me to dream big dreams. But not only to dream them, he helps me formulate the plan, and then he's behind me pushing me, saying, go for it. And I think we've kind of done that for one another, but that intentionally communicates belief and affirmation, and just it's huge encouragement. So that's been pretty important.
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of a little bit different than what we did last service, but we have, we've basically been each other's cheerleaders, right? And we've come together and we've said, okay, this is a great opportunity for you, and how can we make it work? And if it's possible to make it work, we do, and vice versa. There's times when we go, well, it's just not possible. So we have to say no one way or the other.
Like when we moved here, we were both in the same doctoral programs. We went through one full year together. We were church planters. After we moved here, and we were both church planting, and we have little kids, and we needed to work because we're church planters. You know, he went ahead and got his doctorate, and now he says, okay, it's your turn. So it's that give and take of saying not no, but maybe not now.
Right, yeah. And then also, because we're uniquely, so this may not apply to you guys at all, but for us, we've kind of adopted the thought of what is best for the family. Not just what's best for John, not just what's best for Jada, but what's best for all of us. And sometimes there's some compromise in there. So I'll take on something that isn't quite as good as an opportunity I might have had because there's an opportunity for Jada, or whatever, you know, kind of what we're saying. All right, we're getting way off track. Let's move forward. Right?
I think the last thing that we need to say that we have communicated in our marriage is we've communicated trust by listening to one another when we have concerns. Sometimes as women and men have intuition. Some say that women have a stronger intuition than men, but our personality wiring says that John has more intuition than I do. But we listen to one another. And if something just kind of doesn't set well with us, we talk about it. We don't ignore those warning bells. They may turn out to be nothing. They may turn out to be something. But that communicates trust.
Yeah. Well, that's been very helpful to me because I've had times where I've walked into situations where Jada has said, hey, I think you need to be careful about this or X, Y, and G. And then my radar is up where it may not have been up before, right, when I walk into that situation. So that's been really good. Well, friends, do you want to know why your grandparents or your parents have been married for 50 years or longer? It's because they've preoccupied themselves with loving and respecting each other. They took walks. They held each other's hands. They were distracted by each other, not by the things around them. Now, here in Hebrews 13, it says that marriage should be honored by all. We just talked about that, a portion of that. And then it says the marriage bed should be kept pure.
And this leads us to our second point, which is protect the marriage bed, keep the marriage pure, because this is really about fidelity and about sexual faithfulness. So in this passage, the gamut of the spectrum is being covered, from adulterers, with those who betray their marriage vows and they break their pledge to be faithful to one person, as well as the sexually immoral, referring to everyone in sexual activity outside of a covenant marriage relationship. That's the context. And we believe that sex is a beautiful gift given to husband and wife in the confounds of marriage. But before we move further, we've got to talk about an elephant in the room, because we know, unfortunately, that there's a lot of disappointment and dysfunction in this area of many marriage relationships. And some of you may be wiggling, saying, oh, you guys are pastors. You haven't had to deal with any of that, blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is we have. Statistics state that 1 in 6 men and 1 in 4 women have experienced an act of sexual violence or sexual assault before they reach age 18. And I was one of those young women. I was the one of the 4. As a young woman, I was sexually assaulted. And years later, after John and I got married, I brought in a lot of deep wounds and significant fears into our marriage that needed to be brought to light and given opportunity to heal and to move forward and to be able to experience and enjoy this aspect of marriage that God gave to husbands and wives. And in the last 16 years, and I say 16 years because it is a journey that will probably continue until I get to heaven, of healing and being restored whole, thanks to this loving and patient man and some godly counselors and some trusted advisors, I have been able to work through what happened to me and to move forward. And we believe that the church is a place for broken people to be healed. It's not a place where we wear masks and where we sweep things under the rug, and that doesn't mean that you'll stand up and share your story with the masses. But if you or someone you love has experienced an act of sexual violence, I encourage you to seek counseling, to bring it to light, and to walk towards healing. If you need referrals to counselors, come find John or myself. We are not counselors. We can listen to your story. We will promise to pray for you, but we can point you in the direction of people who are highly trained to help you move forward in healing and wholeness.
Yeah. So I want to just talk with you a little bit about some of the things we've done to protect our marriage bed, some of the things we've done. The first is this. We just said nothing's hidden. Nothing's hidden. Jada's past was not hidden from me. Right? It was for a while. Eventually, it came to full story, but early on, she began to unfold that story even while we were dating. So I began to have some context for it. So nothing's hidden. One time we had some friends over, and they were a married couple, and Jada actually dated this guy, and we were sitting at the table. Do you remember this experience? And it became painfully obvious to us that his wife did not know that David and Jada had dated at one point. That was awkward.
The kicks under the table.
Yeah. It's like, no, so.
And the funny thing is they were in each other's weddings.
That's true, yeah, so crazy. All right, anyways, so we say nothing hidden, our stories, we tell our stories. Nothing hidden in terms of our current lives. Every device every email Jada has, we have access to each other.
And I think as pastors, we need to preface this by saying, yes, we have access to one another's emails, text messages, voicemails, everything. That's not to snoop and to know information that we don't need to know.
Right.
Because even as pastors, we're on a need-to-know basis with conversations that we have with other people in the congregation. So I just want to preface that. But that's just for those moments where, those warning bells go off, and we feel the need to check.
We just say there's nothing hidden. So, and number 2, we do this, regular overnight dates. I think we talked about that a little bit already. Number 3, we share a calendar. So, again, this kind of goes back to nothing hidden. Every meeting we have is on the calendar with the person we're having it with and where it's at. So we see that. We see what's going on in each other's lives. Number 4 is this. We filter what we allow into our minds and into our marriage. So from the shows that we watch to, whether it's we might start watching a TV show and then it gets developed and we say, okay, we're not going to watch that TV show anymore. We might start a movie and if it's on, if it's a DVD or whatever, we'll fast forward it through certain parts, but we just say we're going to preserve, our marriage bed with our minds in that way. It also goes all the way to maybe even the books that we may find ourselves wanting to read as well. We're not like, there's certainly great literature out there that's not Christian that are good stories, but we would encourage you to read broadly. But there are certain things out there that are dangerous to our souls and our minds. So.
Yeah, and the big one is, the whole 50 Shades of Grey that's come out. And please hear my heart. If you've read it, if you've seen the movie, you've done that, okay? But I have learned in my life that when I engage in watching movies of that nature, reading literature of that nature, it does not help my marriage. It does not build up my marriage. It seeks to destroy my marriage because then I start comparing. So just kind of flee from things of that nature. And we'll talk more about that at another point. But
Right, good. Well, the sin of sexual impurity is often linked to the sins of greed and envy, biblically speaking. So we see that in the context of Hebrews chapter 13. We see it in several other passages, Ephesians chapter 4, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 as well. It says this in 1 Thessalonians, "It is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable, not in passionate lust like the pagans who do not know God, and that in this matter no one should wrong or take advantage of another brother or sister." So there's 2 things in life that I observe that trip most of us up. Most people get tripped up by the misuse of sex and the misuse of money. And they get linked together often biblically. So that brings us to our 3rd point here, that thriving marriages practice contentment. Thriving marriages practice contentment. The research shows that arguments about money are longer and usually more intense than any other marital disagreement. Anyone else experience that? That's been my experience, right? Yeah.
yeah, especially the early years in our marriage. Very much so.
So money represents different things to different people. And so it's good to know, what does money represent to me? What does it represent to my spouse? Because one person may view money as security, and another person might view money as power, right? And in many relationships, there's one person who's the spender and one person who's the saver, right? I'm going to confess right here before you, I'm the spender. Yeah, I'm the spender, and Jada, you're the saver, right? Yeah. So let's talk about some of the practices that have worked for us in terms of this area of money, and they may not be good, may not work for you. This is just what works for us, but maybe there'll be something that's a starting point for a conversation for you with your spouse when you go home, just in terms of talking about money. Number 1 is this, is that we view money as ours. I know that's not always true. Some people are like, well, I have this salary, you have that salary, you have different bank accounts, that's for you. For us, we just said one bank account, money, it's ours, because, whether I make 75% of the income and Jada makes 25 doesn't mean that I get 75% of the vote. That's not how we've opted to operate. We just say it's all our money, and we make those decisions together, right? So we view it as our money. Really, we view it as God's money. But in terms of this conversation, we're not saying it's mine or hers. It's together ours, right? That we're to be good stewards of. Number two is this: we regularly review the family budget, and then we agree about how it's going to be allocated. So we have a conversation at the start of every year. Sometimes we re-engage that conversation as we need to make adjustments to it. And we have another conversation, but we agree about how the money is allocated. Number three is this: we set our financial priorities together. So that's kind of another way of saying we agree how we allocate it. How much are we going to save? How much are we going to give? Do we want to take a vacation 3 years down the road, and how much is that going to cost? And how much a month do we have to save to pay cash to get there, right? Listen to these statistics, friends. A third of American couples with combined finances say they have committed financial infidelity. They've lied to each other about how they've used their money, right? That's 1/3, 30%. Okay, so 67% of those couples had arguments as a result. 42% say that it caused less trust in the relationship, right? 16% say that lying about the use of money led to divorce, and 11% said that it caused separation. So this is a pretty big issue in our marriages. And so, if you feel the need to grab the credit card bill before your spouse sees it, that might be a problem. That might be a symptom of something, right?
And I think, the area of finances, when we're going through premarital counseling with couples, this is something that we discuss, but we also have them do a Myers-Briggs personality test, have them do strength finders, have them figure out their love language. None of this is to say that secular minds have it better than God, but we view it through the lens of Psalms 139, which says, God, He created us, He knows us in our inmost being, in our mother's womb. All of this information has helped us come to a place to understanding how we each function and think about money and other areas of our marriage.
Because if it was just left to me to plan the budget and formulate all that, right, and you didn't have any input in that, there was no equality there, then we would be overspending.
Yeah, and we have some friends where the husband does all the grocery shopping because that's where his strengths are. For me, I'm the list maker. I'm the planner. I do the grocery shopping. I plan the meals. That doesn't mean I always cook them, but, we try to look at our strengths in that regard.
You only cook them when you want to eat, right?
That's right.
Right, yeah, because for kids when you're out of town, it's like, yeah, Five Guys burgers or whatever, yeah. Okay, well, so our financial priorities include these things that may be different for you, but for us they include living debt-free. It's a high priority for us, and we've experienced the pressure of being in debt. Right now, our only debt is our home, and there's great freedom in that. Listen to what Jan Geiger says. Overspending is no different than being an alcoholic or a drug addict in its effect on relationships. So overspending has the same effect on your relationships as if you were an alcoholic or a drug addict. That's powerful. A person is content with the Lord, with what the Lord has given them, when they are no longer driven by the need to acquire more or be consumed with the thought of money, but instead can view money simply as a means to meet their needs and the needs of the world. I want to just talk a little bit about our journey towards...
Well, our journey to becoming debt-free, it was probably one of the hardest journeys. We didn't, there's some great courses. We didn't take a course. We just got everything out and we planned stuff and we're like, this has to happen. For us, when we were making the decision of whether or not to be church planters, that was kind of like our fleece before God. Okay, God, if in 2 years we can get out of debt, that's our fleece before you, because we don't want to go into church planting having debt, because we didn't feel like that would be wise. So we were just pinching pennies and paying down bills and reducing budgets and praising God that my college students were living with us and giving us free babysitting and things like that. But I tell you, it just recently, within the last 6 months, I came across a budget from when we had lived here the first time. We moved here the first time in January of 2000. And this is not to pat John and Jada on the back. This is to say thank you, God, that you've gotten us this far. But we are living on less than we were 15 years ago. It amazes me. And I have less fear when it comes to money and finances. Because, you know, for me, money represents security and having enough and having food to eat and things like that. But it's really breaking a lot of chains and reduced a lot of stress in our relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
And we don't try to keep up with the Joneses. You know, the fact of the matter is you just can't do everything that everybody else does. Moving away to Denver for 5 years and being away from family, as much as we love our family, it helped us to solidify who we were, what God had called us to do, and to become comfortable with the jobs that we have,
Yeah.
and to live within those means.
Right. The truth is that most people can't afford to do as much as they do. Right. I mean, according to statistics, that a majority of Americans live beyond their means. They spend more money than they make. Right. I mean, our government does that too, but that's another story. I don't know where that came from. I need a filter. Okay, so our financial priorities are to live debt free, to give, and to save. Right. And the thing about learning to be debt-free, not only has it lowered the amount of intense arguing and fights, in our marriage, it's also freed us to do what I love to do, and that's to give. So giving doesn't show up in any of my gift mixes, but I'm a giver. I love to be generous, and so we're free to give a portion to the local church. We're free to give to other organizations as the Lord is leading us to do that, and so that's been a great benefit for me. On the surface, friends, living within your means is a sign that you're content with where you're at, with what God has given you. Living within your means. It doesn't mean that you don't strive to get a job promotion. It doesn't mean that you don't strive for a better whatever. But to live within your means is a sign that, yeah, I'm basically content with what God where God has me. Now, what about being content with who your spouse is and the life that you have in that regard?
Well, Anthony D'Ambrosio says, everywhere you look, there's pictures of men and women half naked. Some look better than your husband and wife. So it becomes desirable. It's in your face every single day and changes your mindset. And that's true. I mean, everywhere we look. And one of the sweetest compliments that John gave me was after Jameson was born. 2 children delivered by cesarean section. And I was just looking in the mirror and just beating myself up, thinking, how can you desire me? How can you love me? Because right now I hate myself. And he came up behind me and he gave me the biggest hug. And he said, you know what? Those are your war wounds. And we worked hard to have kids. We didn't know if we were going to be able to be parents. And you worked hard for every one of those stretch marks. And I love you. And from that moment on, I still think about it, but I know that this man loves me. Extra pounds, short, stocky, he loves me.
Yeah, evil, Sith Lord, all that.
Darth Vader. But truly, we have to stop this comparison game.
Yeah.
I'm sure many of you have seen on news feeds, be it, Facebook, social media, the real news, models and actresses who have young daughters now, they're saying, stop airbrushing me. Stop photoshopping me. Let people see the real me, because this is who I am. Jennifer Garner, she has a little baby bump. People thought she was pregnant. She's like, no, I've just had 3 kids. This is here. It's going to be there. We have got to stop comparing, because it does nothing but destroy. Especially when we place unrealistic expectations on our spouse because of these photoshopped, airbrushed images. And we have to stop comparing our marriages to other people's marriage, because every marriage has areas to work and to grow and to further develop. No one's marriage, not ours, is perfect. We all have areas where we need to grow. So don't always look thinking that oh, their marriage is great. I wish that our marriage was like this, that the grass is greener on the other side, because it's not. It's being watered. And so instead of comparing, water your side of the fence. Nurture your marriage. Invest in your spouse. If there are problems, lovingly bring them up. Be proactive to make it better. It's worth the effort, I promise you.
I know that I'm content with my spouse when this thought is absent. I wish my spouse was like blank. When that thought isn't present, then I know I am content with who God made Jada to be. Number 4 is this. Thriving marriages ask for help. Thriving marriages ask for help, but they ask for it in the right place, right? So there are times when people are struggling in their marriage, and then they go to like their divorced friends who are bitter, right? They haven't really healed from the divorce, and they get advice there. That's not the place to go looking for advice. Okay, nothing against being divorced, and there's lots of grace, friends, but you need to go to somebody who's been married 50 years. You need to go seek out somebody who's been married for a long time, had a lot of battle scars, and are thriving, and ask them to mentor you, ask them to speak into your life, right?
And I think we need to get over the fear of what other people think. We go to the doctor once a year, usually, yeah? Every 30 to 60,000 miles, we take our car in for an oil change. So we need to be okay with regularly taking our marriage in for a tune-up. Who cares if someone sees you sitting in the counselor's office? Who cares if a rumor gets started? Oh, I saw John and Jada sitting in that marriage counselor's office. Oh, our pastor's getting a divorce. You know what? I'll just be the first to stand up and say, no, we're there because we're being proactive to take care of our marriage before a little issue turns into a big issue and could potentially lead down a road that is the point of no return.
Yeah.
We're not counselors. We're pastors. We can give you spiritual input from the Word of God. We can pray for you. We will listen to your stories. But we are not counselors. We cannot give you solid marital advice with things that really work. But we have the names and numbers of qualified, competent, godly Christian marriage counselors who can help you if you are at that point in your marriage where things have snowballed, or if you're saying, hey, you know what? We need a tune-up. As well, we're part of the team for Marriage Encounter that meets several times a year at Warm Beach. We're the clergy couple. We'll be there in November. But last November, we said, hey, we just want to go as attendees because our marriage needs a tune-up. And we had some things that we needed to discuss and we needed to work through. So if any of you who are married and you would like to go to a marriage encounter, they also have an engaged encounter. So if you know people or if you are a couple who is considering marriage, find us. Let us give you the information about that because we highly recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember what the Lord's promise is to us, that I will never leave you or forsake you. And so we can be confident to say, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? The Lord is your helper. And ultimately, it's the Lord that we need to turn to for help. And as we say, God, I need help with my marriage, God does this really cool thing. He begins to put people on your heart. Go talk to, the Brockmans. Go talk to the Joneses. Go talk to Tom Walker, right? He'll put things on your heart. And then he'll also bring people into your life, because that's how he works, right? He works by, when you cry out for help, by studying his word, speaking to you, by using other people in your life. But pick your advisors carefully when you do that. Now, will there be points of failure in your marriage? Yes. If you've been married more than a day, you already know that. Will there be struggles and sacrifices made? Yes, right? And there have been for us as well. But the Lord has been our help. The Lord has been our help, and the Lord will be your help as well. And you can more than survive your life as a married couple. You can thrive together with God's help. Yeah. Can I pray with us this morning? Yeah, please end this thing. Okay. Jesus, thank you so much.